Hey everyone, how's it going? Brian here with another Java game programming tutorial. So to see the first episode of this game making series, you can click the link on the left side of the screen, and to see the Patreon page to support the series and unlock some cool rewards, you can click the link on the right side of the screen. So the last time we left off, we implemented some rotating texture framework stuff. So you can see our cannon here is kind of spun around, and that was one of the prerequisites for us to be able to have our cannon actually track our enemies and like turn as our enemies go by. But there's also something else we need to do before we can have our tracking towers. And we are going to work on that. I think most of this episode is going to be beginning our WaveManager class, and I'll go over that in a second. But first, and I think this episode is going to be named after something to do with time because we're going to fix something real quick in our clock class. So let's go to our game method first, our game class first, and I just want to show you guys something. So you don't necessarily need to copy this down, but I'm going to show you that our clock is running a little fast right now. So I'm just going to name it test, and I'm going to import our clock here, import static helpers dot clock, and we're going to go to the update, and we're going to update our test with the delta time, and then we're going to print out our test variable. So what this should be doing is every time we update the game, we are adding the delta time to our test. So basically it should be counting up in the console down here. So if we run this, let's see, it is counting up, but it's counting up very fast. In fact, some might say 10 times as fast as it should be. So if you kind of like take your finger and like block the second and third digits, you can see it's counting up correctly. Well, now it's like in the hundreds, so that doesn't really work. But you can see it's counting up correctly if you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But it's going 10 times as fast as it should be for normal human being time. So we have been using this, and it doesn't really matter. It's not like, our game is broken because of this. It's just that we're using some kind of arbitrary number for time, like when we do our speed and stuff like that. But we're going to set it back to stuff that we can understand easier, which is actual seconds. And the issue is right here. So we're getting milliseconds, and we're only returning the delta divided by 100. So we're just going to add another 0 right there. And to be super cool and correct about it, we should add zeros here as well to these 3 numbers. Though you could leave all these 3 the same. Just don't change one of these 3 and not the other 2. Make sure to either change all 3 of these or leave all 3 of them the same. And then make sure to add another 0 in here. So now if we run it and we look at the console, you can see we're actually counting in seconds, which is just a little bit easier moving forward because we're going to be dealing with like timers between enemies spawning and waves starting and stuff like that. So it's easier to count in actual seconds and have an idea of what that means. So you'll notice our enemies aren't spawning anymore though. Well, why is that? It's because when we go to our game class and we make our new wave, we have a spawn time of 20 seconds. So 20 wasn't that big of a deal back when we were doing it 2 times as fast or 10 times as fast because it was just 2 seconds. But now that's 20, it's really long. So let's set that to 4 and try that. So if you're following along in the bottom left, you can see every 4 seconds we have a new enemy spawning. Now, the game is kind of slow at the beginning because for the first 4 seconds, it's just empty. And someone brought that up a while ago in the comments of the video when that first changed. It's because when we first made the enemy class, the game would start and there'd be an enemy on the screen, right? Which is how it should be. But ever since we made the wave class, you have like this pause in the beginning where there's nothing happening. And so let's change that real quick. In our wave class, let's what we're doing right now is we're updating and we're starting with a time since the last spawn equals 0, and then we're adding the delta time to that. And then once it gets past the amount of time it needs to reach to spawn a new enemy, we're spawning an enemy. So we're not spawning the first enemy until after the first time has passed, but we should change that, I think. So in our constructor, the public wave part right here at the very bottom, we're just going to run spawn for the first time. So that way we start by spawning our first enemy, and then we start writing the update method to kind of go through and spawn subsequent enemies. So let's try it. Run the game, and we have our first enemy there, and in 4 seconds you should have a little buddy appearing here. There he is. But they're so slow, right? Obviously because we are dealing with real time now instead of 10 times faster time. So when we have our speed for our enemies, which I believe we're setting in the, not the game class, the player class maybe? No, not the player class. Is it the game class? Oh yeah, it's right here. It's right in front of me. It's even highlighted. Okay. When we make our wave, we're giving it an enemy type. And the last variable is the speed. So if we hover over enemy, you can see we're looking for a texture, a start tile, a tile grid, width, height, and speed. It's on 8 right now. We should probably change that, which is like 8 pixels per second about. So we should probably change that to like 40. Let's see how that works. All right. So now we got a decent speed going. We might want to lower the amount of time between the two enemies, but it's just to kind of get everything working. Our tower is no longer shooting for the same reason. If we go to our tower cannon class, we have firing speed equals 30. That is pretty long. We'll set it to 3. Let's try that. And we should have our bullet come out. Slow, of course. Let's go to our projectile class. Delta times speed. Let's go back to our tower cannon class where we make the bullet. Here it is. What's the speed at? It's the second to last one. So we have a speed of 5. Let's change that to like 50. That way it's faster than the enemies. There we go. We should make it probably 2 or 3 times faster than that, but we can, tune all that stuff later. I'm just trying to get our clock, or we changed our clocks. I'm just trying to kind of retrofit everything to work correctly. So now let's work on our WaveManager class. So the reason we're going to be doing this is because here's the tie-in, guys. I think I kind of like said something at the beginning of the episode having to do with rotating textures, and here's where it all ties in 5 minutes later, or however long we are into this episode. We need to give our towers, actually I have paint open. We need to give our towers a reference to our enemies. So we have our tower here, right? Just pretend, you guys. We have our tower. It's funny because I actually made the tower texture and I can't draw it like this. And we have our cannon on top. And when we have enemies going by, right, our tower needs to be able to detect these enemies, and then we're going to have a algorithm to determine the best enemy to shoot at. So we could change that, whether it be like the enemy with the current lowest health or highest health or slowest or fastest, or most likely the default thing we'll do is just the enemy that's closest to the tower is what we'll shoot at. But right now the tower is completely blind. So the tower has no idea that there are even any enemies on the map. And that's because our hierarchy looks like this. Or it's going to look like this when we finish it. We have, just pretend that's a P, you guys. We have a player class. And below that, we're going to have our WaveManager class, which we're about to make, which is in charge of all of our waves. All of our waves. And that, our wave class, has an array list of all of our enemies. And over here is where we're going to make our towers. We might do some kind of tower manager, but I don't think so. I think our player is going to be our tower manager in a sense. So we're going to have an array list of all of our towers that we make in the game. So there's no way for the tower to have any information on the enemies because of this huge gap here. There's no data being passed directly from these two. And so this is the way programming is supposed to work, at least in like object-oriented programming like Java. Because now we have very specific functions we can call. So our player class is going to call probably a method called like getEnemies. So it's GE right there. And it's going to call it from the WaveManager, which we make. The WaveManager is then going to call getEnemies from our wave class. And our wave class is going to return this array list of enemies. So the wave class is going to return that to the WaveManager, WaveManager is going to return those enemies to the player, and then the player can give that list of enemies to the towers that we make. So it looks kind of confusing, but it's actually the correct kind of conventional way to do object-oriented programming. We have like classes that have certain permissions or certain access to variables in subsequent classes here. So we have a very organized approach to getting the data we need and then passing it to our tower. So let's go ahead and make our WaveManager class. We're definitely not going to make the whole thing this episode because our clock took some time in this episode, but we will start it and get an idea of kind of what we're working with here. So first, let's make our variables. We need time. I'm wondering, I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do this yet. Like I know like what we're trying to do here, but there's a couple things that we can kind of switch around, and I might ask on the Patreon feed what you guys think of this. But for now, let's just say private float time since last wave, and let's make an integer for the wave number we're on, and number of, how about this? How about enemies per wave? And let's make the constructor, because I'm sure I'll remember the other stuff that we need after we start working on it. Let's see, time since last wave, wave number, enemies per wave. We also obviously need an enemy type, so enemy type. And what's wrong with this? Oh, it's because of this. I was like, what's going on there? There we go. So I'm rename that enemy type. Sorry about that, guys. Hope you guys aren't like backspacing over and over when I do. Public wave, and it's going to take a, actually time since last wave is going to be 0. So we can just say this dot time since last wave equals 0. Wave number, we're going to start at 0 as well. Enemies per wave, we need to pass that. So enemies per wave. Before that, I think we should pass the enemy type because that's the most important thing. And what's this return type for method? Public wave manager is what we're in here. And so we need to set the enemy type. Oops. This dot enemy type equals enemy type. This dot enemies per wave equals enemies per wave. And let's make our update method public void updates. And a private method, private void new wave. All right. So first off, let's, like I said, we're not going to flesh this out entirely this episode because we're already going kind of long, but how about we just set it up so that it works and we can spawn the first wave here. So let's go to our game class. And instead of a wave, we're going to have a wave manager. So wave manager, like that. And let's go over here to our wave manager class. Let's open up the wave class because we need to add this new variable, enemies per wave, because right now our wave is just infinitely spawning enemies and we don't want that. So let's actually reorganize this. So to keep it in line with our wave manager, we have the enemy type first. So in our wave class constructor, we're going to put the enemy type first, then the spawn time, then the enemies per wave. That seems a little bit out of place here. Let's call it int number of, actually no, enemies per wave, keep it uniform. And so we need to make that up here as well in the wave class, private int declare the variable enemies per wave, and set this dot enemies per wave equals enemies per wave. And we need to decide if the wave is still active or not, so the WaveManager knows to spawn a new wave afterwards. But I think we'll do that next time. So in the WaveManager, let's, in our new wave method, let's say, that's another variable we need. Private wave current wave. So this way we have a reference to the current wave that's running and we know what to update and what to work on. And so in our new wave method, let's say current wave equals a new wave, which takes an enemy type. And what else does it take? A spawn time and the enemies per wave. For the spawn time, let's put that in our WaveManager. So time between enemies. Put it in between these two. Float time between enemies. And we'll set that down here. This dot time between enemies equals time between enemies. Alright guys, I know you can see what's wrong here. Okay. Just a space there. Alright. So new wave takes enemy type, takes the time between enemies, and takes the enemies per wave. Enemies per wave. Alright. At the bottom of our constructor, we should say this dot new. Nope. We should say this dot current wave equals null, just to start us off. And you know what, actually, what we could do, it could be a little tricky here. Be a little bit more efficient, I think. So instead of, I'm not sure if I want to do that. Now, let's just do what we were going to do. I was going to say instead of a void, we could actually just return a wave and just set our current wave equal to new wave. But there's other stuff I want to do in here, like increment our wave number and stuff like that. So we're not going to do that. Let's say this dot current wave equals null in here. And then in our update, we're going to say if current wave does not equal null, then current wave dot update. And at the bottom of our constructor, just like we have at the bottom of our wave constructor, the spawn method, we're going to say new wave to get that first wave started. And I know I kind of jumped around in this class and might be confusing right now. It's because I'm kind of like deciding the best way to do it as I'm talking to you. But the next episode, we're going to go completely devoted to the WaveManager and the Wave class, I think. So it should be a lot more fleshed out and easier to understand. If you're confused by anything, then just leave a comment below. So let's go to our game class, and we're going to set, we can get rid of this, I think. Wave. Why does it take a grid here, but not, oh, that's just the, I see. Okay. I see. So let's just say wave manager equals new wave manager. This can be a long line here. And the order that we need is we need the enemy type first. So we can just backspace this forward to there. So the enemy type is first. And then we need the time between enemies. So after our enemy type, we're going to put a comma between these two parentheses and then return or enter to a new line. And this is still in the constructor. It's just kind of to organize it so it doesn't have to like scroll side to side. So time between enemies, let's just say, I don't know, 4 for now. We could change this later. And the enemies per wave, 5. And then down here, we want to update our wave manager. It's a lowercase u. We need to go back and kind of make all these method names uniform because we have some lowercase, some uppercase. I think we're gonna do, I want to do one episode that's just like, oops, I knocked the mic. One episode that's just like house cleaning that just like goes through and kind of deals with these little tiny issues that aren't worth, or that I forget to bring up in regular episodes. Anyway, so I think this should work. So what we did is we, first off, am I still printing this? Yeah, we can get rid of that and that. That's just my test I made it at the start. What we did is before we were calling directly the wave class, but that's not what we want to do forever, right? Because we want separate waves. We want like a wave of UFOs that come by, right? And then we either like lose there or we beat them and then it goes to wave 2, right? Like tower defense-y. So now we're calling the WaveManager class, which is going to manage all of our waves for us and, you know, increment the difficulty. And we could say every time we make a new wave, we can decide, all right, maybe the enemy's health or speed should be proportional to the wave, or maybe want to have like, you know, different enemies depending on what wave number it is. So this WaveManager class is going to be kind of really our overlord for deciding all of our enemy ideas and like the difficulty ramp for our game. But let's run it and just see if anything works. And it looks like it is. Looks like we do have an enemy spawning here. 1, 2. I guess we'll see what happens after we get through 5 enemies, because I think that's how many we have per wave. Actually, I don't think anything's going to happen because we don't have that implemented yet. So, surprise! Anyway, point is, it works. Enemies are still spawning. And next episode, we are going to completely work on our WaveManager class and wave and enemies classes. And then hopefully when we do that, we'll be able to have our turrets automatically detect enemies and actually fire bullets at them. And then we'll probably do enemy health and then maybe player and tower placing and stuff like that. I don't know. Lots of exciting stuff in the future. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.